The always controversial subject of Australia's management of asylum seekers is once again dominating politics after last night's riot at Sydney's Villawood Detention Centre. The mayhem is raising all the usual questions about crowding at detention centres, delays in processing, the way such facilities are managed, and why Australia is attracting increasing numbers of boats. Shortly, I'll be speaking to the Immigration Minister, Chris Bowen, but first this report from Connor Duffy.
We're in a very precarious situation, a high-risk situation, where we're going to see, unless something changes, increasing rates of self-harm and protest, and sadly, even suicidal behaviour.
That ominous warning from psychiatrist Louise Newman on 7:30 earlier this week was borne out last night as the Villawood Detention Centre in Sydney erupted. A rooftop protest turned violent. Buildings were lit and authorities had to battle right through the night to bring the centre back under control.
The violence is a form of communication. It's them communicating distress. It's a group that feel voiceless.
It took some time for the firefighters to be able to gain entry. It wasn't until New South Wales Police Public Order and Riot Squad were here promptly, escorted the firefighters back into the centre. They had roof tiles and other pieces of furniture being hurled at them by some of the detainees, so it was impossible for them to extinguish the blaze in the early hours of the morning.
Those claims of firefighters being attacked were repeated widely in the media, but firefighters say they've been exaggerated.
I think there's been a degree of a beat-up around this. The important thing to state here is that no firefighters were injured last night. The reason for that is because, happily, both the Firefighters Union and the department agree that in situations of civil unrest, our role is to pull back. We engage in defensive firefighting operations.
What is clear is that the damage to the centre is extensive, with as many as 9 buildings destroyed. It was a terrifying night for the detainees and guards inside. 7:30 has been told by a source that the rioters threatened violence against other detainees who refused to join the protest. Today there were calls for those responsible to be denied visas.
It is completely unacceptable, and people who are responsible, guilty of criminal acts, just should not be given permanent residency of our country.
Australians are sick and tired of waking up to reports of detention centres being set alight and of police being attacked by rioting asylum seekers.
The government, though, says the ringleaders were asylum seekers who had had their applications rejected and were due to be deported.
If they think they will change their visa outcome, if they think they will be accepted as refugees because of this sort of protest action, they've chosen the wrong government.
The Villawood riot is not an isolated incident. Similar riots have broken out at Christmas Island and Darwin, and Australia's detention centres are full to bursting. There are now 1,874 detainees on Christmas Island and 4,491 on the mainland. In 2007, just 158 asylum seekers arrived by boat in Australia. Last year, that number soared to 6,535. By coincidence, residents in the Tasmanian town of Pontville were meeting last night to discuss the government's plans to set up a new centre there.
Appreciating if you let them give their presentation, then come and ask your questions. We're not going to shut down. You're not a council meeting now.
With numbers of asylum seekers so high, the government needs the extra capacity, but the locals are unhappy about it.
You're not answering the question, a simple question. Why no consultation before a decision has been made?
David Kernkey owns the property next door to the planned centre and says he'll fight moves to have it built there.
It certainly does ignite our concerns. I mean, it clearly galvanises in my mind the very real risk of having major problems with any proposed detention centre here within a kilometre of us at Pontville.
On Monday this week, 7:30 raised concerns about Serco, the multinational company that operates Australia's existing detention centres.
Look, we know from Christmas Island Detention Centre that there's been regular and fairly consistent levels of profound understaffing. We see dramatic staff turnover at all the centres.
The opposition says the government's decision to abandon the Pacific solution and close down the detention centre on Nauru is to blame for the surge in arrivals.
The only way to end these problems is to stop the boats, and the way to stop the boats is to adopt the policies that the coalition has been putting forward for quite some time now.
Today, the opposition received some unlikely support from psychiatrist Tanveer Ahmed, who has worked with asylum seekers.
I think some people, well-meaning people, I think can be naive that there are enormous pull factors to come to Australia, and a good portion of the people that come here are illegitimate.
He was once opposed to the Pacific solution, but has had a change of heart. He now believes the Howard government's policy to send asylum seekers to Nauru limited people smugglers' ability to sell a product and is, on balance, more humane.
The less attractive we make this option, the more humane it is, because we have less people in detention, less people needing to be processed like this, which I think is ultimately humane.
But refugee advocate David Mann takes the opposite view and says the government should use detention only as a last resort.
It's worth noting that the government over 2 years ago promised to bring an end to this practice of mandatory, indefinite and prolonged detention because, as it said, it was dehumanising, very harmful to people and not an effective or civilised way to deal with the problem.
The opposition is calling on the government to fully investigate last night's riot and release the cost of it and other disturbances at detention centres.
I call on the government to come clean on what the full costs of these riots have been. We still don't even know what the cost of the last riot was.